Today we're going to look at equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions can sound confusing, but when you see it, it looks easier. An equivalent fraction have different numerators, different denominators, but they're equivalent because they are the same size. So let's look at some pictures and try to understand. If we look at this first fraction here, let's try to figure out the fraction that we see in the picture. That's correct. We see 1/5 because one piece is colored in out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, so 1/5. An equivalent fraction for this would be when we take each one of these pieces and divide it into a smaller equal part. So if I divide it here, 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 and here, let's look at it now. Now I have 2 pieces that are gray out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So an equivalent fraction would be 2/10. So 1/5 is equivalent to 2/10. Let's look at this bottom one. What would be the fraction for the bottom one? That is correct, 3/4. If we are looking for an equivalent fraction, we can divide these fractions into smaller pieces. So what would be the equivalent fraction? That's correct, 6/8. Now, let's look at another example. Let's start by looking at this top fraction. What is the fraction that you see? That's correct, 2/3. Now, let's think about how to divide this fraction or partition it into smaller pieces. Remember, each piece still needs to remain equal. So I'm going to divide it here, I'm going to divide it here, and here. So what would be my new fraction? That's correct, 4/6. But let's look at this as a different way now. Imagine getting an equivalent fraction by using multiplication. I'm going to multiply the numerator by 2. 2 times 2 equals 4. 3 times 2 equals 6. So if I do it to the numerator, I have to do it to the denominator. Let's look at another example just using multiplication. What is the fraction for this picture at the bottom? That is correct, 3/5. If I want to make an equivalent fraction, I can take 3/5 and I can multiply the numerator and the denominator by a number. But it is important to use the same number for the numerator and the denominator. So let's multiply by 2. 3 times 2 equals 6. 5 times 2 equals 10. So an equivalent fraction to 3/5 is 6/10. So let's check it out. Right now I have 3/5. If I partition each of these into equal parts, that leaves me with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is my numerator, out of 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces. So 3/5 and 6/10 are equivalent fractions. What is the fraction that we see here? That is correct, we see 4/5. Let's use multiplication to find an equivalent fraction. But this time, I don't want to multiply by 2. Maybe I want to multiply by 4. As long as I use the same number for the numerator and denominator, it doesn't matter what I multiply by, it will give me an equivalent fraction. I know that 4 times 4 is 16, and I know that 4 times 5 is 20. So that means that 4/5 is equivalent to 16/20. What is the fraction we see here? That's correct. It is 1/2. So let's make an equivalent fraction. Maybe I want to multiply by 3. Again, as long as I multiply the numerator and the denominator by the same number, I will get an equivalent fraction. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So 1/2 is equivalent to 3/6. Let's take it a step further. This is an equivalent fraction with a missing number. I need to figure out what this missing number is. So, to figure out the missing number, I look at my denominators. I have a denominator here, and I have a denominator here. Remember that to find an equivalent fraction, we multiply the first fraction to give us our equivalent one. So I ask myself, 3 times a number gave me 9. I know that 3 times 3 gives me 9. If I multiply the denominator by the 3, I know that I need to multiply the numerator by, correct, 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, so my numerator would be 6. Or my equivalent fraction, 2/3, is equivalent to 6/9. Let's look at this one. Here we have 5/8 is equivalent to 25 over a mystery number. So, I'm going to use my numerators this time. I know that I have 5 times something equals 25. 5 times 5. If I did it to the numerator, then I do it to the denominator. 8 times 5 is 40. So, an equivalent fraction would be 25 over 40.